You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we've got a major update out of Fulton County. Fani Willis, the district attorney, said that she will announce her charging decisions by September 1st. So, do you expect that to mean that we won't hear between today and mid-August about any potential indictment as was previously announced?
No, I actually suspect we're going to hear by August 7th. The reason I say that is because when Fani Willis contacted the judges in Fulton County and said, please clear your dockets and your decks for the weeks of August 7th and August 14th, that is a sure sign that she intends to use those 2 weeks to run all of the charged defendants through the courthouse, through the courtrooms for their first appearance, which is going to be the arraignment on the indictment. She hasn't backed off that request as far as we know. So I suspect, even though, yes, there's been talk about, well, it could be lingering until September 1st, I suspect we're going to hear something probably before August 7th.
Okay, so what is the soonest you think we can expect an announcement, given that we'll know by September 1st?
I think the soonest could be this week. I think she could ask for the grand jury to vote. She could unseal the indictment and then sort of set all of these defendants on for their arraignment hearing. Each defendant, and we're sort of sensing there could be dozens of defendants in Fani Willis's case, will need to have their own individualized court appearance because, one, they'll need to be arraigned on the charges, which just involves formally reading them the charges, having them enter their plea, which inevitably will be not guilty. That's the plea they will all enter. And then the judges will have to take some significant time setting conditions of release for each one, assuming none of them warrant a prosecutor asking for pretrial detention. So this is going to be a time-consuming process. So, I have a feeling we're going to hear something perhaps as early as the next couple of days.
Okay, now, how unusual is a statement like this from a district attorney?
Really unusual. When I heard Fani Willis and when I saw a video clip of her giving an interview and saying, our work is complete, we are ready to go. That is not ordinarily something a district attorney or a U.S. attorney, if it happens to be a federal case, will say to the media in advance of an indictment being returned by the grand jury and unsealed. So that is a sure sign that she's ready to go. We're going to see indictments very soon.
Okay, so given that she told, CNN this weekend that the work is accomplished, we're ready to go, what is the process now? Like, what are we waiting to see happen here?
So what will happen is the grand jury will take a vote. That will all be behind closed doors. Grand jury proceedings are secret by law. So they've either voted it out already and the indictment remains sealed from public view, or they'll take a vote this week. The next step would be to go to the court, to have the court review the grand jury's vote, and then to ask the prosecutor, when do you want this indictment unsealed? What Fani Willis will do is she will ask the judge, let's just assume 24 people are indicted. She will ask the judge for 24 what are called bench warrants. That's a kind of arrest warrant that is issued by a court when somebody's been indicted and they now need to be involuntarily brought into the courthouse, into the courtroom to be arraigned on the indictment. So all of those bench warrants will be issued, and then Fani Willis will decide whether to have those bench warrants executed by sending law enforcement to the home or the place of employment of each defendant and have them arrested, or contact all of their defense teams, their defense attorneys, and negotiate a voluntary surrender, a voluntary turn-in where they can agree upon a date to have each defendant arraigned, and that person can voluntarily show up first at the police station to be processed and booked, and then taken over to court for their first court appearance.
Okay. The Trump team did try to have this case thrown out. Can you talk about the judge's response to that effort and if that response was particularly unusual?
It was a great read. It was a very compelling order issued by Judge McBurney. It's only about 9 pages long, and I want to read just one sentence because I think it kind of sings. But what he did was he just definitively denied all three claims Donald Trump had made. Let me add, it wasn't just Donald Trump who made these claims, trying to get the grand jury, the special purpose grand jury report thrown out and try to get Fani Willis and her office kicked off of the prosecution. These are ludicrous claims from somebody who has not yet been indicted, so he doesn't even have standing to file these kinds of requests with the court. There was one other person who joined in Donald Trump's claims, his attempts to try to kill this investigation, and it was one of the fake electors. So there were actually two parties to this motion. Here is some of what Judge McBurney said. First of all, he said, you don't have standing, so you can't even file this. So I am dismissing your request that the special purpose grand jury report be quashed, that is, torn up and thrown out. I am rejecting, denying your request that no evidence that was amassed by the special purpose grand jury during its investigation be used against you. It can be used against you. And I am denying your request to have Fani Willis and her office removed from prosecuting you in this case. And here is one, I don't want to call it snarky, but it's a little bit unusual for a comment to be dropped in a ruling like this by a judge. Judge McBurney says, the drumbeat from the district attorney, Fani Willis, and by drumbeat, he's now talking about the sort of publicity and the statements that have been made by both sides, by the district attorney's office and by Trump and company. The drumbeat from District Attorney Fani Willis has been neither partisan in the political sense nor personal, in marked and refreshing contrast to the stream of personal invective flowing from Donald Trump. He doesn't say Donald Trump. He softens it. He says the personal invective flowing from one of the movements, one of the petitioners, one of the parties. Well, it's only Trump and the one fake elector. So, you know, it's thinly disguised reference to the personal invective of Donald Trump.
Yeah, not a whole lot of ambiguity there. Glenn, can you speak on the significance of barricades being erected around the courthouse?
Yeah, they're loaded for bear. You know, the law enforcement authorities responsible for providing security to the Fulton County courthouse, to the judges, to the prosecutors, to the defense attorneys, to the witnesses, and to the jurors are taking this deadly seriously, as well they should. We know that Donald Trump calls his base to, to protest, to perhaps engage in violence, to try to address this travesty of him being prosecuted yet again for the crimes he committed. So they are erecting barricades around the Fulton County courthouse to make sure they are prepared for any eventuality involving Donald Trump's base and, showing up and acting up.
Okay. Glenn, what charges do you expect to see come out of Fulton County here?
The more I have seen of Fani Willis and her team, the more likely I think we will see RICO charges. RICO is kind of like a conspiracy charge on steroids. It's like the mother of all conspiracy charges, RICO conspiracy. Fani Willis has brought RICO conspiracy cases. RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations. And it's not just your simple conspiracy when a couple of people get together and say, hey, let's go rob a 7-Eleven. A RICO conspiracy is the kind of conspiracy that sort of has some organization to it. It has members in the conspiracy who play defined roles and recurring roles in the criminal enterprise. And you have to prove a pattern of racketeering activity, which means you have to prove at least two predicate crimes, two crimes that qualify as sort of RICO-related crimes. So it takes more proof from the prosecutor to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that these folks were involved in a RICO conspiracy, a corrupt enterprise or organization when they were trying to overthrow or overturn the results of the Georgia state election. But I have a feeling we're going to see that granddaddy of all conspiracy charges, a RICO conspiracy.
And now, finally, let's end with this. We know that Trump is going to use the same delay tactics that he employs in all of his other trials. So what avenues could Trump use to delay this impending trial in Fulton County, Georgia?
Yeah, he will file frivolous motion after frivolous motion. Some of that will eat up court time because once a litigant files a motion, unless the judge feels like it's filed in such bad faith without any factual or legal support, such that the judge sort of rejects it without even asking the opponent, the prosecutors, to file a legal brief addressing whatever has been alleged by Trump in his motion, it's going to eat up court time because, generally speaking, anything that's filed by a defendant, there will have to be a reply brief by the prosecutors. There will have to be a date set for oral arguments to resolve the motion and perhaps even to hold an evidentiary hearing if the court concludes that in order to resolve the motion, the judge needs to take evidence. All of that can eat up court time. So, I wouldn't expect a trial date this fall once we have a Georgia state indictment handed down. I do hope that Fani Willis, though, meets the urgency of the moment. And just as Jack Smith has been doing, tries to keep it on a very accelerated timeline so that we can get this case tried well in advance of the November 2024 presidential election. At least that should be the aspiration.
Okay, well, obviously a lot to stay on top of, not just with this case, but every case that Trump is contending with right now. So if you want to stay on top of legal news, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.